The input function is used to grab data from the user in real time. The key word for input in your homeworks is prompt. If you're asked to prompt the user for some data, that means you are using the input function. So there's two ways to use the input function, one here and one here. This is if you are prompting the user for some numerical data. And this down here is what you would use if you are prompting the user for some text or non-numerical data. So when the input function is used, it means it's going to pause, prints out this string to the screen, or the command window, and then it pauses and waits for the user to type something in. The user's going to type something in, press enter, and then whatever the user enters in is going to be assigned to this data, to this variable. So there's a couple things that we are going to ask ourselves. One, what are we asking the user for? Is it text or numbers? Because that's going to indicate if you have this option or this option. Then you need to ask, where do you want to store the data? And that's where this variable comes into play. Whatever the user enters in is going to be stored in this variable. So you can only ask the user for one thing at a time. Once the user presses enter, that data is stored in the variable, and you can use that variable just like you would use any other value. So one thing to point out is the only difference between these two is if you're asking for numerical data, you just have the string. If you're asking for text or non-numerical data, you have this additional input that just indicates that, hey, whatever is entered in is going to be stored as a string. Or for our purposes, essentially it's going to be stored as text. And that's the input function. Like I said, anytime you see the keyword prompt, that means you're going to use the input function.